Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I am here every single Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep dive, and having a good time while doing it. You guys know the deal. So before we get into it today, a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are not getting my emails, you got to sign up for those emails. You can go to masterchimletter.com and sign up there. I send them every day. They're free. And I tend to expound upon many of the topics that I discussed during these calls a little bit more thoroughly, aggressively, with a little bit more consistency. So go to masterchimletter.com. There are other relevant links in the description. Feel free to check those out. Today, the topic for today, who do we got here? We got Jesse. What's going on, brother, man? You're on Saxon. Good to see you, darling. Guys, always feel free to say what's up. I like seeing the same familiar faces. Casey in the house. Casey, good to see you. Just so you guys know, Casey's the one that edited TRIBALNOMICS. So those of you that call me a misogynist, I had a lady, and she's like 6'12", so she's almost like two ladies worth of lady. Casey's like, great. The one time I show up, this is what I get. Johnny Groove, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Magoo, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Bill Crocker. I don't have my reading glasses on. I almost said Bill Cracker. But looking at the picture, that might work. Well, good to see you. All right, let's get into it. So today's topic is one that I visited many different times, sort of taking different angles. Jamie, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. And it's this idea of complaining, right? So there's a couple of reasons. Well, I'm going to go over reasons why people complain, but when looking at those reasons, you could probably deduce why I'm always talking about complaining, because it is embedded in those reasons. Aaron, what's up? I see you out there, darling. Good to see you. But it's one of these things that I think just more people need to focus on. It's such a easy change, an easy pivot to the way somebody approaches their day that produces so much in the form of a return. It just doesn't make sense to not do it. It's almost like, thinking about like germ theory, when doctors understood to wash their hands before operations, like mortality went down significantly. And it's like, all we had to do is wash our hands. And it's like, yeah, when you stop complaining, not that it's ever going to cease entirely, right? And when I get into the reasons today why people complain, that'll make a little bit more sense. But the goal isn't to eliminate it completely. The goal is to not rely upon it. The goal is not to sort of keep it in your toolbox. You show up at a job and you got one tool in the bag, like that's probably going to be the tool you use. If you're showing up to conflict, friction, trauma, any sort of, oppositional discomfort, and the only thing you can do is complain, well, you're going to complain, right? That might be redundant, but I think you guys get what I'm saying, right? We want to sort of go beyond having to rely on complaining. But that being said, in this morning's email, as I usually do, I wrote a list of questions to sort of frame this around. And also, as usual, I never sort of cue that up. I'm always finding it once I'm on the call. But here we go. It's very organic, this process, right? I did, not completely organic, I did write this list, so I wanted to make sure I covered these bases. But let's get into, it's pretty much a gimme. The first question that I wrote in the email this morning about today's talk is, what are the 5 reasons someone complains? What are the 5 reasons someone complains? So that's what we're going to get into. We're going to get into these 5 reasons. Before we do that, though, as I'm looking at my notes, I realized I also I researched the origins of the word complain, and I wanted to share that because I think it's relevant, right? Because it certainly adds to the take that I have on complaining in general. So the word complain originates from the late Latin word complingere. Complingere. And it's like this late Latin is when Latin started being influenced by Italian. So me, it's like complingere, something like that, whatever it is. But it's made up of two basic parts. Cum, which I think most people understand is sort of together with. It could be completely, thoroughly, right? So cum, and then plangere, which means to lament, bewail, or strike. But the context of strike in this case is a reference to striking oneself in grief, which was a common practice in mourning rituals. So plangere, one of the roots of complain is to lament, to bewail, or to strike oneself in grief. So to complain is it's not something that is supposed to be neutral. There is no neutrality to it, where it's good complaining and bad complaining. No, the roots of where we get that term and that concept is based in suffering, right? It's based in the sort of traumatic reaction to some sort of stimulus, right? The root plangere itself also gives us the words like plaintive, which is like plaintive. I'm reading here, so it's not like I might be mispronouncing things. Which is expressing sorrow, and plaintiff. I might have some experience with that one, which is one who brings a complaint in court, right? So the idea is somebody has been made to suffer and identifies as that sufferer, right? And that's where complaining is sort of born from. This idea that somebody is sort of less than because of something that happened, and this is the reactive response, right? So we want to sort of understand first and foremost, this is not a neutral term. The concept is you were hurt, show me on the doll where the bad day hurt you, one of those scenarios. So let's get into it. Big D, what's up? It's my little brother there. Good to see you. All right. So we got the 5 reasons people complain, or the 5 drivers of complaining. And there are 2 main categories here, internal and external. Now, I could use intrinsic or extrinsic. I think it's just fancy terminology. They're still synonymous in the context that I'm using them. So internal and external will do just fine. So of the 5, 3 are internal and 2 are external. Let's get into them. The first driver of people complaining is catharsis. This is an internal driver. And catharsis is something I talk about all the time. It's when people are getting overwhelmed and they complain as a sort of release or venting of that frustration. Those of you that have been following my stuff for some time, you know about the bucket model, right? And the metaphor of the bucket is the bucket represents, our ability to sort of withstand or carry around trauma. And when that bucket fills up and overflows, that is the cathartic event that occurs when we can no longer hold the totality of our trauma. Well, catharsis is the thing that will happen whether we want to or not when it overflows, but there are also cathartic aspects to some of the rituals we have. Somebody who is stressed out going through some stuff, but he's working out regularly, or he's going for walks, or he goes dancing, or he likes writing, or all these different things he does ritualistically that have a cathartic benefit, right? So catharsis in the context of complaining is somebody's doing that to sort of release that overflow of trauma, right? And it is, again, one of the internal drivers of complaining. Number 2, a creative driver, right? So sometimes people complain as a function of their creativity. So what I mean by this is these are the people that complain as a sort of a meditative talking out loud about circumstances because it drives their own internal dialogue forward. People that use this creative aspect of complaining are the people who will sort of invite somebody in to their own personal problem-solving ritual, right? Can you believe this fucking car isn't starting right now? I mean, I just changed the fucking thing, and it's almost like they're telling somebody something that they're going through, but them saying it is also part of this creative process of problem solving that they have. So the creative is probably the least, damaging of these drivers, I would say, but it is still unnecessary and it is still anchored to a need to complain. Right? Just because complaining is part of a process that ultimately creates a productive outcome, that does not inherently identify complaining in that sense as being productive, right? The totality, yes, but the individual component could probably be removed, if not swapped out for something more neutral or positive, right? So that's the second reason that people complain. Number 3, this is the third, and this is also the last internal driver: reinforcement and validation of self-identity. So sometimes outwardly expressing that something is not right, which we would, generally say that complaining is a way for somebody to say, this is not me. It would be somebody complaining about, all these guys that, they have low work ethic. These guys have no work ethic. They can't work all day without taking 20 breaks, or they show up late every day. And it's some sort of critical complaining messaging that is really at the same time pronouncing to those who would listen and themselves that they are not that. It is a sort of outwardly expression of the line between them and somebody else, right? Now, is this inherently negative or damaging? I would say that if you need to identify yourself as the antithesis of somebody else, you guys have heard me say before, we never want to be anti anything, because whatever we identify ourselves as being the opposite of controls us to some extent, right? If somebody says, I'm anti-vegan, right? Well, whatever vegans start doing to maintain that identity, you have to kind of do the opposite, right? Well, what if vegans at some point say, well, it's all right to eat these kinds of meats? I don't know how the fuck that would happen, but if you're somebody who identifies yourself as anti something, you really give the control of who you are to another party, to another identity itself, which we don't want to do, which is why even in this case, I would say reinforcing and validating who you are through complaining about another identity still gives control to them, and therefore still a negative ritual for somebody to have, right? So now we're going to get into the external reasons, right? So it's 5 reasons, 3 internal and 2 external. The 3 internal so far were catharsis, creative, and the reinforcement and validation of self-identity. Number 4, the 4th reason why people complain, and the first external one, seeking empathy and sympathy. Now, I could have made this 2, an individual empathy and individual sympathy, but then I would have the 6 reasons. And, the 6 reasons doesn't sound as good as the 5 reasons. So it's going to be the 5 reasons. And number 4 is seeking empathy, sympathy. They will feel better if you either validate their suffering, where empathy would be used, or feel the suffering with them, where sympathy would be used. When people complain, sometimes it is to recruit this shared, either acknowledgement or experience of the individual who's complaining suffering. They want somebody to sort of put their hand on their shoulder and say, I understand, you're right, it's wrong, I can't believe that happened to you. And the recruitment of that not only helps them validate and therefore sort of share in a processing of that trauma, but it also lets them know that what they're doing is actually still productive. Therefore, in other words, it incentivizes them doing it. If I complain and somebody sympathizes with me, it incentivizes me complaining, because I have somebody else who I'm probably connected to validating not only what I'm complaining about, but also by proxy or indirectly, the fact that I'm complaining, right? So this is why this would be negative. And now finally, we have the fifth reason people complain. And I would say the fifth, even though it is not inherently strong, there are powerful applications. There are applications that are connected to strength where this fifth one is concerned. And the fifth driver of people complaining is manipulation. They want to compel your compliance without asking a favor or incurring a debt. Sometimes people will complain about something because they want you, the person who is hearing them complain, to offer some form of assistance. They want you to help them, but they don't want to also ask you to help them because it's a different sort of function. It's a different ritual. If I ask you, hey, do me a favor, can you help me paint my house today? It's like, yeah, it almost is more transactional when presented that way, in that, there's an expectation of some reciprocity involved. However, if I were to say, yeah, man, I got to paint my house today, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's just me by myself. I'm going to try, but if I don't get this done, to the point where you leverage somebody's ability to be guilted into something to where they'll say, well, I could help you. Oh man, you think so? You wouldn't mind helping me? Oh man, I really appreciate it. You could be grateful, but notice there wasn't really a request. I'm looking to leverage the emotional angle to get you to help me, as opposed to the sort of more logical, almost transactional, context of giving you the opportunity to help me. Right? Hey, can you do me a favor and help me paint today? That does not recruit the same emotional exposure that looking to manipulate somebody through complaining potentially does. Right? So, what are the 5 drivers of people complaining? Number 1, catharsis. They complain to feel better because they're overwhelmed. Number 2, creativity. Outward complaining sometimes is a component to somebody's problem-solving process. They're basically thinking to themselves out loud, and when somebody is exposed to that thinking out loud, it is to them in the form of complaining. Number 3, reinforcement and validation of self-identity. People will complain, usually about other identities, to help better define their own to those who are listening or to themselves. Number 4, this is the first external one, seeking empathy or sympathy. They'll feel better if you validate their suffering and or suffer along with them. And finally, number 5, they want to compel your compliance without asking for a favor or incurring a debt. You guys have heard me say before, with language and communication and influence, the only time it is effective to use weak language is when you are looking to manipulate, right? If you are doing that and using that strategy unethically, that's on you, but the way that the mechanism works, it can be used to manipulate somebody, right? So there you have it. So what's going on? So Bill asks, you think people complain because you're not happy or they're not happy with themselves? More generally, that could absolutely be a reason. And I would say the fact that they're not happy with themselves could be reflected in any one of those, maybe 4, maybe not the 5th one, of those reasons. So there could be multiple reasons why them not being happy with themselves has led them to complaining. But usually, regardless of what that motivation is, complaining is always associated with weakness. Even if you are using complaining to manipulate, you are doing it because you are not strong enough to not use it, right? So if I trick somebody to sort of let me in the club, right? I'm going to, I'm this guy's cousin, so-and-so, or whatever the case is. I don't know what the trick would be, but I know I'm trying to get into a club. But if I'm trying to trick somebody to get into a club, it is because, first and foremost, I do not have the ability to do it directly. I do not have the ability to just will myself to do it. I need to sort of exploit somebody's vulnerability to misrepresent my intentions to get them to comply with what I want them to do. That is a strategy that is born from the inability to do it directly, right? It's like, why do assassins, kill people in the middle of the night? Because they can't kick down the door in the middle of the day and do it, right? And get away with it. They're not strong enough, right? Now, obviously, there's a very, this or that, binary way of looking at it. But if you were stronger, you wouldn't need to manipulate, right? So that is one of the things that we have to acknowledge there, So being happy with yourself, you can have people who are happy with themselves and still complain because they just have that dysfunctional, tool in their toolbox. People cannot be happy with themselves and still not complain. So they're not necessarily, associated, that directly, but I would say that it is certainly a correlative, happiness and the tendency to complain, 100%. Right. So Aaron says, show me on the doll where it hurts you, Jamie, to our screaming 5-month-old. Never too early to implement pressure of power. You got to be careful. Up in Canada, they could, I think they could like put you in jail for that nowadays. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. For me, in my coaching, I've been coaching, obviously the school over 20 years, but my one-on-one coaching program has been around over a decade. And all the men, almost the majority, don't want to say majority, at least half of the men that I coach have a disproportionate amount of inefficiency or friction in their lives due to their inability to stop complaining. Complaining, and I've railed on about this so many different ways, over the years and in many different talks and presentations, but complaining gets in the way of action. If you are going to own, your ability to resolve a scenario, the value of owning it is that it expedites the solution. If there's something you can do to fix it, and you guys have seen my complaining flowchart before, but if there is something you can do, then do it. If you're complaining about something that there's nothing you could do about it, you need to shut the fuck up because there's nothing you could do about it. If there is something you could do, you should also shut the fuck up and do it. Once it's done, you should shut the fuck up because it's done. This is very simple. Not always easy, obviously. Some people, because they rely so consistently on this emotional, cathartic aspect of complaining, it's sort of their go-to when shit goes sideways. And I've had plenty of conversations where, it's like I'm there's no way for me not to be looked at as an asshole at the end of this conversation, but I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're telling me what's going on with them, and I'm just waiting for them to finish just so I can go, can you shut the fuck up and do something? It's like, what the fuck? Yeah, but it's just, it's fucked up that he did that. Who gives a fuck? It's fucked up that he did that. What is the mission, the obstacle? Like, what is the objective of acknowledging that somebody was fucked up for doing something? Or even worse, you'll get people, and again, this is not a good people don't do this, bad people do this. Like, everybody has a relationship with these dynamics, and it is completely exclusive of whether or not they're good people, productive people, etc. But this is certainly a negative thing to have as a part of your processes. You'll have people that will complain about individuals for the actions that these individuals are taking. But then when you investigate a little further, you get these people to acknowledge that the people that they're complaining about have done something that is consistent and congruent with everything they've done like this before. In other words, it's like, yeah, my neighbor was being an asshole to me this morning. Well, is your neighbor usually an asshole? Yeah, he's an asshole every time I see him. Why are you complaining about him being himself then? Oh, well, he shouldn't be like that. Well, what's the utility of having a conversation about the way somebody should be or not be with somebody other than the person that you're talking about. It's like he should be. Well, go fucking tell him that. Not that I think there's a great utility in that either, but it's like, what the fuck are you telling me for? Sometimes you have this complaint-driven conversation with somebody, and that conversation is really the conversation that the complainer should be having with the target of the complaints. What are you telling me for about this individual who did this thing that was inappropriate or fucked up, or like, you should tell them. Yeah, but I don't want to tell them, because then shut the fuck up. That's the way the flow chart works, right? It's like, if there's not something you could do with this information, why are you holding on to it? You're like a hoarder of useless, weak information. Like, oh man, let's fuck it. Let's be controversial, right? So whenever you see a pause, sometimes I'm in my head going, should I? And I was like, fuck it, So another application of this: people who are abused as children. Oh shit. This is where you put the headphones on, guys, if you're at work. There's a certain point where many of these individuals need to acknowledge what happened to them, and then they need to put it down and walk away. I, on many occasions, have been confronted with the recruitment of empathy and sympathy from another individual in the form of them telling me about when they were abused as a younger child. And my reaction is never, I try to not be over the top, right? There's a difference between pressure and breaking somebody. I'm not looking to break people, but I also understand that pressure is necessary to get the power that we're looking for. And a lot of times in these conversations, when I've been shared this story of grief and trauma and abuse, and and it's like, all right, how much longer are you going to hold on to that? And when I say something like that, these people sometimes it's like they want to lose their fucking minds. And I would say it's not because inherently what I said is so, offensive or inappropriate, but a lot of times the reaction, the gut, immediate reaction that they give me is because what I've said is just so different from the way everybody else has reacted. But we can't be bound by those old formulas. Like, we should be able to look at the truth as we understand it right now and make the best decision based on who we are and all of the tools for problem solving we have right now. Doing this because it's always been done like this is not a very strong position to have. So when you have people talking about being abused as a child, it's like, okay, all right. What could you do about it? Nothing? No, then, here's the flow chart. Like, I'm not saying, but the flow chart says you kind of got to shut the fuck up about it then. Yeah, but I was really, abused as a child. And, it's like, I get it. Okay. Tell the grizzly bear that comes to your campsite in the middle of Alaska that you were abused as a child. Like, I guarantee you the bear's not going to go, are you serious? Man, that's fucked up. I was going to eat you. But to have all that shit happen to you as a kid and me eat you, like, nobody deserves that. That's a double whammy. That's not going to happen. Right? So understand that just the premise that you think that there's value in discussing these past traumas is built on the expectation of this game that somebody's going to play with you. Because in the natural world, it's like, listen, get over it, and again, I don't mean to say that. I don't mean to say that to be, to ignore the value of these traumas to people, the damage that these traumas have done. I'm just bringing to the forefront the idea that reiterating the discussions about them has a point of diminishing returns, and it's usually, at most one and done. Get it out so that it's real. So you don't feel like you're repressing it, right? Because talking about the bucket model, the last thing you want to do also is put a lid on the bucket. It's like, oh, how do I make sure my bucket never overflows? I'll seal a lid on top of it. That's a good way to explode the fucking thing, right? And you'll see that happen with individuals. So I'm never an advocate for repressing this stuff, But there is a point where once it's out, it's out. Don't put it back in just so you can put it out again, right? Once it's out, it's out. You know, it's almost like if you're cleaning the floor, sweep all the dirt off the floor. But you want to give it a better, the floor looks clean, but you want to give it a better cleaning than you've done so far. So you throw the dirt back on and you clean it again. You throw it back. It's like at some point, it's like, yeah, it's already gone. You know, it turns out we have to do something else now. Right. And this is what happens with complaining. You know, one of the reasons that I listed before, right? Number 3, reinforcement and validation of self-identity. There's also a point where if you're always talking about being abused, and that's a component of who you are, like you're the guy that was abused when he was a kid. If you stop talking about it, you almost feel like you're losing a piece of your identity, which is again why we have to be so conscious about just how much we put complaining about our circumstances into the interactions with the people around us. Because then we become that guy, you know, and listen, and that might, and again, it's not even a value judgment in terms of, you know, you should always do this, you should never do this. You do whatever the fuck you want. Some people really enjoy being weak. I can't say that they're not supposed to do that. That's not my job. I advocate for certain decisions over others, but ultimately, I also respect, you know, the ability for an individual to follow his own preferences. You know, I tend to not be tyrannical where those things are concerned. Judgmental, sure, but judgmental as a sort of pronouncement of our incompatibility, not as a pronouncement of why you're wrong and you shouldn't do this. And like, well, do whatever the fuck you want. People are allowed to lose. You know, if anything, that's the value of winning, is that there is this observable contrast in outcomes with people who have made different choices. It's like, yeah, I don't want to work hard. I want to sleep all day. I want to get high. I want to get drunk. I want to play video games. Okay, you could do that. You know, these are the outcomes of all the people that do that, by the way. And it's a good thing we get to see that, because then I can say, I don't want those outcomes, so maybe I shouldn't do these things. But if somebody still wants to try it themselves, that's on them. Right? That's on them. But I'm never going to build alliances with people like this because of the liability of being connected to them. Nobody deserves my resources more than me. Why would I ever waste it on somebody who has proven that they do not have the ability to be a good investment? Any resources invested in an alliance with them is a waste. I can't afford to waste resources. I'm not that guy, right? Sometimes you see these people that are independently wealthy, or sometimes the elderly, or people that are at a later stage in their life where they just decide to take on these projects, whether it's, you know, large operations or individuals that they're going to try and help and mentor. And it's because they do have resources to waste at that time, right? They got time, they got money, they got connections. They say, yeah, let me fuck around and, you know, make this long shot work. You know, and they're able to do that. Most of us aren't in that position. Most of us have resources that we're accountable for. Those of us that have families have not only resources that we're accountable for, but our resources are directly tied to our ability to fulfill our obligations with those that are counting on us, that are relying on us. I could certainly say, you know, here I am as a man, I could make whatever decision I want. Everybody can go fuck themselves. But there's a certain point where if I am doing that dysfunctionally enough, my kids don't eat. So there's always this context that even I have to honor with how I conduct myself, right? When I started having kids, I stopped hitting people almost overnight. You know, it's like there was a point where fighting, you know, 1-2 fights a week was a normal occurrence. You know, somebody said something, words are exchanged, somebody got hit. That's just the way it worked. There's a certain point where I was like, all right, I can't do that anymore. Right? Jamie writes, to sum up, the goal of every good psychologist, as opposed to a grief parasite, is to have their patient get over it. 100%. 100%. Case's best flowchart ever. Damn right. The power of simple. All right, guys, that was a short one. I think we should call it there. No sense rambling on. I got out what I wanted to. I shared my 5 drivers for people complaining. I even shared my Chat GPT backed etymology of the word complain. And it was a pretty insightful one. I think there's value in understanding that complaining is tied, linguistically to grief, to suffering, right? And that's one of the things that we have to remind ourselves when we so comfortably use complaining in the place of action. All right, guys, I appreciate you. You guys know I'll be here next week. Make sure you guys are getting my emails. But aside from that, I will see you next week, same time. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.